Welcome to the Credit Edge. Ideas on time and working for a living. Let's get started.
Okay, let's dig in. We're opening this deep dive, not with a question, but with a statement. A line pulled directly from the source material you sent us, and it really sets the entire tone. It says, advice is cheap when someone else pays the price.
That just lands, doesn't it?
It really does. And our mission today is, I think, pretty simple on the surface. We're looking at the true price of advice. And we're looking at it through a very specific lens.
A lens of consequence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who actually pays the bill? I mean, in hours, in actual labor, when that advice just doesn't pan out.
Right.
And we should be clear, this isn't about, bad actors or people with malicious intent. Not at all.
No, the essay is very clear about that.
Right.
The danger isn't bad intentions.
It's the distance. The structural gap between someone comfortably giving advice and the person who has to live with the heavy, tangible outcome of following it. Especially, for those of us who trade our hours for wages, we're going to try and find out where that cost truly lands.
And that perspective it's everything. This isn't theory. This is about lived experience. It's grounded in the reality of a working person's life, where a mistake isn't just a learning opportunity.
No, it's missing rent. It's losing time you can't get back.
Precisely. So the conversation has to be quiet, steady, truthful. We're focusing on what we lose, the hours we burn when we borrow conviction, not just what we might, hypothetically earn from it.
So how are we going to frame this? What's our lens?
We'll use the framework of the Credit Edge principles. They're designed for this exact world of scarcity. Scarcity of time, scarcity of energy.
Okay.
And with every piece of the essay, we'll ask those core grounded questions.
Yeah.
What's really being traded here? How many hours is this going to cost me? And what's the hidden price? The one attached to the convenience of just following someone else's map.
The essay starts with this really powerful, almost confessional line. I think it defines a lot of our early years in any career. The author just says, I didn't ask why. I listened.
That's the default setting, isn't it?
It is. And this compliance, this listening, it was directed at what the text calls the background hum of professional life.
The shoulds.
The shoulds, exactly. The advice is stuff we've all heard a million times. Work harder, be patient, play it safe, wait your turn.
Standard procedure.
Right. And the essay confirms how it felt in the moment. None of it sounded wrong. Most of it sounded reasonable. And that, for me, is the critical part. It sounds reasonable.
It has the weight of tradition behind it, the confidence of the person saying it.
So here's my first point of friction then, because this is where I think a skeptical person, someone listening, would step in and ask, why is advice that sounds reasonable, advice that sometimes even works, why does this essay immediately label it as dangerous? I mean, isn't work harder sometimes just necessary?
That's the right question to ask. And the essay's answer is fascinating. It doesn't point to the quality of the advice itself. It points to the source's position relative to the outcome. The danger was never bad intentions. It was, and the text is very specific here, the distance.
Okay, the distance between the advice and the consequence.
Exactly. And this is where we bring in our first principle, Credit Edge Principle 5. Awakening is the foundation. And awakening just means seeing the cost. Recognizing that every price has another price hidden right underneath it.
And understanding that is how you start to reclaim your own path.
It's the only way. If you can't see the full cost, if the person giving you the advice is structurally protected from feeling that cost, then your whole decision is built on a flawed foundation.
And the author lays this out in really stark economic terms, doesn't he?
He does. He says the people giving the direction, they didn't carry my hours. They didn't feel the pressure in my weeks.
And here's the kicker. They didn't absorb the risk when things didn't work out.
That's the whole ball game right there, the complete transfer of risk.
Let's focus on that phrase for a second, carrying our hours. When someone tells us, just be patient, and it takes, say, 3 years for that patience to lead absolutely nowhere, the advisor, the person who said it, they've lost nothing. They still have their job, their security, their capital. But the listener, the one who followed the advice, what have they lost?
They've traded 150 weeks of real, irreplaceable labor for nothing.
It's gone.
That's the mechanism. That's the risk transfer we have to see. For a working person, time is a finite resource. It's directly convertible into survival rent, food, the basics.
Yeah.
When advice comes from a place of security, from a lifetime of advantage, the advisor they can't feel the weight of a wrong turn. Not for someone whose life is tied to the next paycheck. Their hours are insulated by capital, Ours are not.
So that's the structural difference the essay is getting at.
It's the critical difference.
Okay.
When the advice giver is secure, they're optimizing for comfort, for ease of delivery.
Right.
But when the listener is in a precarious position, they have to optimize for truth, for mitigating the consequences. The advice feels free to the giver because for them it is. It costs them nothing no matter what happens.
But when we accept it, we're the ones absorbing all that risk. Risk from people whose lives operate by a completely different, more protected set of rules.
It's the ultimate disconnect, isn't it? A person with a 10-year safety net telling an hourly worker to wait their turn. It's a luxury that the worker just cannot afford.
Which brings us back to the line that sets the boundary for this whole deep dive. The essay says it so clearly. For us, the working class, advice often arrives from people who never carried our hours.
And that's our boundary.
That's our boundary. We're not judging advice on how wise it sounds. We're analyzing it through the lens of time and consequence.
Did the advisor have skin in our game?
Exactly. And if they didn't, how much do we stand to lose by giving them our hours? That's the question we have to keep asking.
Okay, so let's start tracking that cost. Let's follow the essay's path from the immediate decision all the way to the long-term consequences.
Let's start with the most immediate cost. The hidden price of comfort. Right now, today. The text gives this really profound image of that financial and psychological distance we were just talking about. It says, advice travels easily when it doesn't have to pay rent, when it doesn't feel exhaustion, when it doesn't live inside the outcome.
That quote is just. It's a perfect illustration of Credit Edge Principle 1. Time is the only real currency.
Money soars labor.
Exactly. When the advice is cheap, it costs the giver nothing. But if it fails, it costs the listener their stored labor. It costs them the time they spent earning that rent money. Or even worse, the time they now have to spend recovering from the failure. The debt is always settled in hours.
I think we need to linger on that phrase. Doesn't have to pay rent. It's the anchor of a working life, isn't it?
It's the constant, the unyielding monthly cost that demands a certain number of your hours just to satisfy it.
Yeah.
The advice, just floating free from a position of wealth, it has no such obligation. So if a listener follows advice like, wait for the perfect opportunity, and they quit their steady job,
And that opportunity never shows up.
then that listener still has to find the hours now in crisis mode to cover their shelter. The risk transfer is total. The cost translates instantly and directly to the fundamental unit of our lives, our time.
Okay, so let's make this really concrete. Let's say an advisor says, invest in this stock, it's a sure thing, and it tanks. What's the real difference between a wealthy advisor losing, say, $10,000 and the listener losing $10,000?
It's not the number. It's the labor the number represents. For the listener, that $10,000 might be 6 months of savings. That's 6 months of focused, exhausting, essential labor just gone.
And for the advisor?
It might be a fractional loss they barely even notice. So when we take that easy advice, what we're really trading is our future hours. Hours we might have to spend just trying to fix the outcome. We're borrowing conviction, and the price is always paid in future labor.
So not just money being traded, it's our future. It's the very definition of debt, isn't it? You're borrowing against labor you haven't even performed yet.
Precisely. And the price isn't just financial. It's paid in long-term emotional and physical weight. The text uses that specific word, exhaustion.
Yeah.
Advice that's given from a place of security. It feels zero stress to the giver. But when you are the one living inside the outcome, navigating the failure, that stress gets absorbed into your body, into your capacity, into your physical being.
That's a hidden cost people don't talk about.
Think about the cost of chronic stress from decision-making. If you are constantly following someone else's direction, constantly absorbing the risk of their weightless ideas, you are mentally wearing yourself down.
And that stress, it translates into lost productivity, poor health.
And a diminished ability to make good decisions when a real opportunity finally does arrive. The lack of proximity to the consequence is what allows the advice to travel so easily. If the advisor had to live with the exhaustion,
The advice would be different.
it would be heavier, it would be more carefully considered, and it would be a lot less likely to prioritize ease over truth.
It's this insidious transfer of weight, then. They transfer the intellectual weightlessness of their idea onto our shoulders as heavy, practical, physical consequence.
Paid in exhaustion and stress.
The ease of their words becomes the burden of our bodies.
And that's a dangerous spiral.
Yeah.
Because when you're exhausted from carrying that transferred weight, you're less likely to question the next piece of easy advice that comes along.
Because questioning takes energy.
Energy you no longer have. And that leads us directly into the systemic part of all this.
That's a perfect frame for the next section because the source identifies this profound psychological vulnerability that's born from that exhaustion. The essay states, we confuse confidence with understanding, certainty with alignment. And then the text immediately connects this back to our energy levels. This happens, especially when we're tired, especially when we're trying to survive.
That fatigue, that's the real threat.
It is, isn't it? When you're in survival mode, when you're just exhausted from carrying all this borrowed weight, questioning it's hard work.
It's a luxury.
It is. And compliance in that moment, it offers this temporary, intoxicating relief. It feels safe because you've delegated the crushing responsibility of having to think.
And we mistake the sound of confidence, the authoritative posture, the quick answer, for actual understanding of our unique, complicated situation.
Which brings us to the next principle.
Principle 2. Systems profit from compliance. Systems, whether they're corporations, markets, social norms, they're just elegant structures that grow when we don't notice them.
And compliance is always the path of least resistance.
It's designed to be. It's a shortcut that trades your future freedom, your independent direction, for a little bit of comfort today. We mistake confidence for insight because genuine insight takes time and research and energy that we just don't have when we're tired. So when a confident voice says, go this way,
you outsource your thinking. You grant that voice agency over your next few months, maybe even your next few years. But let me push back on that a little. Why does the system profit? Let's say I follow the herd, I wait my turn, maybe I eventually get that promotion. If I invest in the safe consensus stock, maybe I make a little money. That benefits me, doesn't it?
It might benefit you fractionally, yes, but it benefits the system structurally. And that's the key difference. The system is on the other side of that trade because what it gains is a predictable, non-disruptive participant.
Okay, explain that.
Well, think about a big company. If every junior employee follows that confident, borrowed advice to be patient and wait their turn, what does the company's management gain?
Stability.
They gain a stable, low-churn labor pipeline. They don't have to constantly spend money training new people. They can suppress wage pressure because everyone's been told that longevity, not performance, is the key to getting ahead.
So when employees confuse certainty, that feeling of knowing what's next, with real alignment,
the truth that this path actually serves their personal goals,
they stay longer than they should. They internalize the company's need for stability and mistake it for their own career strategy, and the profit goes to the system.
In reduced turnover costs, in maximized time extraction from dedicated workers. It's brilliant in a way.
So the system benefits from our mental fatigue. A tired mind will always prioritize immediate safety over some long-term strategic calculation. It wants the thinking to stop for a minute.
Precisely. And the essay confirms that exact escape route. Listening feels easier than questioning. Following feels safer than thinking alone.
That feeling of safety, that's the system's greatest currency.
It is. Because to think alone means you have to carry the full weight of the decision and the full weight of a potential failure. Following lets you share the blame, or at least you think it does. You can say, well, everyone said the market was going up, or my mentor told me to wait.
But in reality,
only one person pays the price in hours and consequence. The individual listener. The system thrives because we default to the perceived safety of the herd, even if that herd is walking a path shaped by someone else's old, outdated expectations.
And the crucial thing is that the system is scale invariant, isn't it? It doesn't matter if it's stock advice or career advice. The mechanism is identical.
Absolutely. The entity giving the advice benefits from your predictable movement, not necessarily from your best possible outcome.
It's the difference between being an efficient gear in a machine versus being a complex person. The system wants you to be the best gear possible.
Even if that means your personal growth stalls out or your pay stays flat for years, your compliance is the fuel for their predictable growth.
If compliance offers comfort today, then the ultimate price is paid tomorrow. It's paid through this quiet loss of personal direction.
And that's where we get to principle 3. Awareness is reclamation. True freedom, real freedom, it starts by seeing the patterns because, as the text says in this really powerful sequence, over time, borrowed thinking becomes habit, and habit becomes direction.
That's where the short-term comfort turns into long-term destiny. We need to unpack that sequence. How does a single borrowed thought actually become a direction for your life?
Well, a single borrowed thought like you have to get this specific degree or you have to stay at one company for 5 years, that's manageable, right?
Sure.
But that thought, when it's repeated and you don't question it, especially when you're tired, it becomes a deep groove in your mind. It becomes a habit. You stop checking if it's still true or useful. You just execute it.
And those habits all added up.
They determine your direction, your life's direction, regardless of what you might have actually wanted. You end up not where you planned, but where the sum of your compliant habits took you.
So awareness is reclamation because you first have to see the pattern of compliance before you can even think about breaking it.
You have to. If you don't realize you're operating on borrowed, habituated thinking, you can't reclaim the steering wheel.
Let's apply this to something concrete. A default path our listeners might recognize. Say a young professional is told, never job hop, it looks bad on a resume. So they stay at a low-growth job for, 7 years because of that borrowed conviction. What's the unseen cost there?
Oh, the unseen cost is massive.
Yeah.
It's the opportunity cost. And you can quantify it in two big ways.
Okay.
First, financially. The cumulative difference between the salary they could have earned versus what they did earn. If they missed out on a $5,000 raise every year for 7 years, that is a staggering amount of lost stored labor. Hours they now have to work decades later just to catch up.
And the second way.
Emotionally, they sacrificed the development of their own professional identity. They invested 7 years into being a predictable employee, only to find out the market actually values dynamic, adaptable skills, not static loyalty.
The essay draws this perfect, cold parallel with the financial world. It says, markets work the same way. Borrowed conviction feels like strategy until the cost arrives.
That's the definitive financial definition of this, isn't it?
It is. You're invested based on what someone else said, a confident guru on TV, a pundit, a relative, not on your own research or your own risk tolerance. And it feels like a strategy because the language is so confident and sophisticated.
But it's fundamentally hollow. It's conviction without foundation.
And that conviction lasts.
Exactly, until the market turns against you. And the cost, when it arrives, it's not the feeling of being wrong. It's the very real hours of lost labor that you have to somehow recoup.
So like the person who buys into a housing boom just because they heard real estate only goes up.
That's the classic example of borrowed conviction. When that bubble bursts, the advisor who said it might lose a paper gain, but the working person who stretched themselves for a mortgage based on that certainty, they lose their principal, their stability, maybe even their home, a direct, immediate loss of their accumulated hours.
So the focus has to be on those hidden costs. It's not a sudden, loud event. It's the slow burn of opportunity cost, the paths you didn't take because you were so rigidly following someone else's map.
It's the emotional cost of investing years of your life in an outcome that was never really aligned with who you are, only with a borrowed idea of what success is supposed to look like.
The final destination of all this compliance, it's kind of haunting, according to the text. The cost shows up so quietly. It says it appears in paths chosen by default, in years shaped by expectations that were never fully ours.
That quote should be taped above every desk.
It really should. It's that moment you look up at your life, your career, where you live, the debt you have, and you realize this wasn't a strategic choice I made. It was a series of choices I just allowed because they felt safer at the time.
And the cost isn't some sudden fee. It's a slow, quiet erosion of ownership over your own hours and your own years.
And that erosion just adds up over time. The years shaped by expectations that were never yours, those are the hours you spent carrying someone else's weight.
And principle 3, awareness, is the only counterforce. It demands that you do the difficult work of looking back and asking, which of my big choices were truly my own, and which were just defaults, based on a need for comfort or perceived safety?
Okay, so if following feels safer, what's the moment that breaks it? What's the specific behavioral shift that actually stops this compliance model in real life? If we look back at that cost, what's the one action that can derail the default path?
It's the introduction of relentless, calm questioning.
Just asking why.
Just asking why. It's realizing that the paths that demanded your conformity and your patience, but gave you nothing back except the need for more compliance. Those paths have to be broken with that simple question. You can't reclaim your hours until you stop automatically accepting the directions.
And that leads us to the essay's turning point, the moment of clarity.
Yes. The text clarifies that the danger was never the content of the advice itself. It was the source's proximity to the pain. The line is, the danger was trusting voices that never carried our weight.
And this is a refinement of that awakening principle.
It's principle 5, awakening, but as an active, ongoing process of reclamation. The awakening begins with that shift. Instead of debating if the advice is good or bad. We just analyze the source's proximity to our outcome.
Okay, but let's add some friction here, because this sounds like an impossible standard. Are we saying that only people who have had our exact struggles can give us advice? Doesn't that rule out all experts, all high-level strategists? How do we filter advice if we demand shared experience?
That's a powerful and necessary challenge. And the essay isn't demanding shared experience. It's demanding shared proximity to consequence.
Okay, what's the difference?
It's not about whether they've been poor. It's about whether their own security is directly tied to your success. A wealthy consultant advising a huge corporation, they might never have carried our hours. But if their multi-million-dollar contract depends on the measurable success of their strategy,
They have skin in the game.
they have proximity to the consequence. The danger isn't general advice from successful people. It's the weightless advice from the indifferent. When an advisor has nothing to lose, their advice is risk-free for them. And that makes it inherently dangerous for the person who has everything to lose.
Their hours, their stability.
Right.
So the moment we start asking why, we begin to examine the messenger's alignment, not just the message's content. The text captures this perfectly. Once you begin to ask why, you also begin to notice who you've been listening to.
That's the moment autonomy begins.
It's the realization that critical thinking isn't just about dissecting ideas. It's about dissecting the mechanisms of influence and the structural incentives of the person delivering them.
And the text gives us a distilled roadmap for this, a sequence to achieve clarity and direction. It says, proximity reveals alignment. Consequence reveals truth. Questions reveal direction.
Let's trace that sequence.
Okay, first, proximity. We measure how close the advisor is to the pain, to the rent, the exhaustion, the lost hours. If they're miles away from it, their alignment with our best interests is suspect, even if their advice sounds kind.
Right.
Second, consequence. This is the final, cold, and only true metric. We judge the advice not by how confident it sounded when it was delivered, but by where it actually led.
And finally,
Questions. The act of intentional, persistent questioning is the engine that generates your own true direction. You can't borrow direction. You can only build it, one question at a time.
so the questions are the engine of autonomy. If you're not asking why, you're just following someone else's direction.
And that direction will inevitably lead to a destination that serves them, their structure, their stability, their profit margins, better than it serves you and your finite number of hours.
And this changes everything about how we consume information, doesn't it?
It moves us from asking, is this advice good, to asking, what is the structural incentive of the source? Once you understand the incentive, the advice itself often becomes secondary. You can predict the outcome of following it. The systems always favor their own survival over individual flourishing.
So we've traced this path from the comfort of compliance to the heavy moment of questioning, from distance to proximity. This whole journey is the practical application of these credit edge principles to our daily, seemingly small choices.
It is.
So let's synthesize this. If we accept the responsibility of our own thinking, what's the return on that labor? What do we get for carrying all that weight?
It yields what we call Principle 4, Keys compounds.
Okay, peace is a big word. What does that mean here? It doesn't feel very peaceful.
And we have to be clear about that. Peace here isn't the absence of effort or stress. Not at all. It's the absence of internal conflict. It's the absence of borrowed thinking. It's the quiet, steady clarity that comes from intentional action and deep alignment.
So discipline builds freedom.
Moment by moment. Time pays the dividend. The awareness you earn through all that questioning, it leads to compounding freedom. This earned discipline, this heavy responsibility, is the direct opposite of the temporary fake comfort you get from compliance.
So when you decide something based on your own awareness of the consequence,
You create a system of internal alignment. Every choice you make, every hour you spend is aligned with your personal truth and your calculation of risk. That compounding alignment, the knowledge that you own your hours and your direction, that is peace. It's the only durable peace a working person can find.
that alignment is powerful. But the essay is immediately honest about the cost of entry here. This isn't some escape hatch to an easy life. The text says it directly. Listening closely does not make life easier. It makes it heavier. Why does it have to be heavier?
Because awareness creates immediate and complete responsibility. Once you see the true cost, once you see the structural incentives, you can no longer hide. You can't delegate blame to the system or to the advisor. You carry the full heavy weight of your own decisions.
Which feels massive compared to the weightlessness of just following the confident voice.
That heaviness is the currency of ownership. It's the trade-off for true autonomy. You trade the lightness of compliance for the weight of self-direction. It's the difference between being a passenger who feels light but has no control,
And being the pilot.
and being the pilot who carries the weight of everyone's fate, including their own, but operates with complete clarity. The reward, though, is worth the wait. The final point is that clarity becomes your ultimate protection. It's a shield the system can't get through.
As the essay says, but once you hear the weight clearly, it is hard to pretend you didn't know where the cost would land.
And that is peace. The steady, quiet confidence that you acted based on your own truth, your own proximity to consequence, rather than the ease of advice delivered from a safe, indifferent distance. Clarity is the most durable protection a working person can build.
Because it protects the most precious resource.
Your future hours.
Our deep dive today was really centered on the essay's calm, steady message. The goal isn't to convince others or argue with the system.
No. The goal is simply to help yourself see. To see the system for what it is. A structure that is completely indifferent to your individual hours and your personal exhaustion. And therefore, awareness is your only real protection against borrowed thinking becoming a life of default expectations.
And to bring this all back to the Credit Edge focus on time and labor, if money stores labor and advice is cheap because someone else pays the price, then we have to end with this thought. Consider the hours you spend today, the directions you're currently following. What fraction of your borrowed thinking is right now costing you labor that you haven't even earned yet? That debt, the debt of unearned future hours already committed to someone else's default path, that is the real debt we carry. And it's the one we have to fight the hardest to reclaim.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the true price of borrowed thinking.
It's an ongoing journey into the costs we carry and the hours we claim. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Credit Edge. Remember, your time matters. See you next episode.